Hello, everyone. I hope you're having a wonderful day. Today, we'll dive into another gripping chapter of Tutu and Yuri's story. After a shocking medical diagnosis changes Tutu's life forever, Yuri's mother seizes the chance to push her out of the family, leading to a chain of tense confrontations, emotional battles, and a chilling encounter that will leave you breathless. If you enjoy this story, don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you won't miss the next dramatic episode. The rain poured heavily against the hospital windows, blurring the outside world into a gray, trembling haze. Tu Tieu sat on the examination table, her hands gripping the edge so tightly that her knuckles turned white. She had been feeling unwell for weeks, fatigue that clung to her bones, dizziness that made the room spin, and a strange, constant ache deep in her chest. She thought it might just be stress from the pregnancy and her still healing leg. The doctor's voice was steady, but his eyes betrayed a hint of sorrow. "Mrs. Tu Tieu, the results are back. You have a rare and serious illness. It's going to require immediate treatment, but..." He hesitated, glancing at her swollen belly. "With your pregnancy, the risks are very high. We'll need to discuss options." Her heart pounded so hard, it felt as if it might break through her ribs. Her first thought was not of herself, but of the baby, the life inside her. No, not now. Not like this. By the time she left the hospital, the rain had turned into a cold drizzle, soaking her thin jacket. She limped slightly, her injured leg still tender from the accident weeks ago. Her mind was clouded, every step feeling heavier than the last. How would she tell Yuri? Would he blame her? Would he choose the baby over her? When she arrived home, Yuri wasn't there. He was still at work, but someone else was. Yuri's mother sat in the living room, her sharp eyes narrowing the moment Tu Tieu stepped in. "You look worse than ever," the older woman said coldly. "What did the doctor say? More medicine for you to waste money on?" Tu Tieu swallowed hard. She had never felt smaller under that gaze. It's serious. But before she could finish, the older woman's lips curved into something that almost resembled a smile, but carried no warmth. "Serious, you say? Then you shouldn't be here. This house doesn't need a sick daughter-in-law who's already a burden." The words struck like ice. Tu Tieu felt her throat tighten, but she forced herself to speak. "I'm still carrying your grandchild." The older woman's eyes flashed with something unreadable. A grandchild? Or an excuse to stay here longer? You can't even take care of yourself. What happens when your sickness gets worse? Who will care for the baby then? Yuri works hard. He doesn't need to waste his life looking after you. The cruel insinuations sliced through her heart. She wanted to shout, to fight back, but her legs trembled. Her body was already weak, her illness making her dizzy, her leg throbbing from standing too long. That evening, Yuri came home to find Tu Tieu sitting silently by the window, staring at the rain. He immediately noticed her pale face and trembling hands. What happened? Did the doctor say something? Tears welled in her eyes, but she forced a smile. "It's nothing. I just need some rest." She didn't want to burden him. Not yet. She didn't want him to see her as weak, but she didn't know that outside the room, Yuri's mother was listening, her mind already spinning a plan. Later that night, the house was silent except for the faint ticking of the wall clock. Yuri had gone to take a shower, leaving Tu Tieu alone in the bedroom. Suddenly, the door creaked open. Yuri's mother stepped inside without knocking, her shadow stretching across the floor. "You think you can hide it from me?" she said softly, almost like a whisper. "I know you're sick. I heard everything from the hospital staff. Yes, I have my ways. And I know you don't have long before you become even more of a burden." Tu Tieu's eyes widened. You followed me?" "I'm protecting my son," the older woman replied, her tone sharp. "He doesn't deserve to be chained to someone who might not survive the year. And that baby? It will be better off without a mother who can't even stand without wincing." Tu Tieu's hands clenched the bedsheet. "How can you say that? This is your grandchild." "Blood means nothing if it comes from weakness," the older woman hissed. "I'll give you 1 week to leave this house quietly. Don't make me find other ways to remove you." The threat hung in the air like a poisonous mist. When Yuri returned, the tension in the room was almost tangible. Tu Tieu forced herself to smile again, hiding the truth behind her eyes. She couldn't tell him. Not now. Not when she was unsure if she could even fight what was growing inside her body. The next morning, Tu Tieu awoke to find a breakfast tray beside her bed. It was unusual. Yuri's mother had never served her anything before. "Eat," the woman said curtly, placing a bowl of steaming soup on the table. For a brief moment, Tu Tieu wondered if this was an olive branch, a rare act of kindness. But as she took the first spoonful, she noticed a strange aftertaste. Bitter, metallic. Her stomach churned. The older woman stood there, watching her intently. "Eat it all. You need your strength." Something in that gaze made Tu Tieu's hands tremble. She set the spoon down slowly. "I'm not feeling very hungry." "That's exactly your problem," the older woman snapped. "You never do what's necessary for your health." Before Tu Tieu could respond, Yuri walked in. He noticed the tension, but said nothing, sitting beside Tu Tieu and taking her hand. "You should eat a little. I'll go with you to the hospital later." The older woman's eyes flickered, displeased that Yuri was involving himself, but she said nothing, only watching as Tu Tieu pretended to take another sip. That afternoon, Tu Tieu went for a short walk in the garden to clear her head. The air was damp from last night's rain, the scent of wet earth surrounding her. She tried to steady her breathing, but her mind kept returning to the doctor's words and the chilling threat from Yuri's mother. Her illness was a shadow she could not escape, and now she feared it wasn't the only thing that could destroy her. From the window upstairs, Yuri's mother watched her like a hawk. She knew Tu Tieu was growing weaker, and soon she would make her move. Tu Tieu sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the wooden floorboards as if they could answer the question burning in her mind. What now? Her diagnosis felt like a shadow clinging to her skin. No matter where she went, it followed. Yuri had been doing everything to keep her spirits high, preparing her favorite meals, playing soft music in the evenings, even holding her hand until she fell asleep. But the truth lingered in the corners of the room. Her time might be limited. What she didn't know was that beyond the walls of the house, someone else was plotting. Yuri's mother had not stopped since the day she heard the news. To her, Tu Tieu was no longer just an unwanted daughter-in-law. She was a burden that could drag Yuri's life into misery. And the illness? It was the perfect excuse to push her out for good. That afternoon, Yuri left to run errands, leaving Tu Tieu alone. The air in the house felt heavy, almost too still. A faint creak of footsteps on the wooden floor made her glance up, and there she was, Yuri's mother, standing at the doorway with a bowl of soup in her hands. "I made this for you," she said, with an uncharacteristic softness. "You need strength now more than ever." Tu Tieu hesitated. The warmth in her tone didn't match the sharp glint in her eyes, but her own exhaustion made her lower her guard. She took the bowl, murmuring a weak, "Thank you." Yuri's mother stood by, watching every sip, her fingers twisting the hem of her sleeve. She didn't have to wait long. 10 minutes later, Tu Tieu's stomach twisted violently. A cold sweat broke across her forehead, and her breathing quickened. She clutched her abdomen, trying to stand, but her legs trembled and gave way beneath her. The older woman stepped forward, pretending concern. "Oh my, are you all right? You must have eaten something bad. Let me help you. Outside, maybe you need fresh air." Fresh air was not her intention. Half dragging Tu Tieu toward the back door, she muttered under her breath, "Better to end this now before it gets worse." Just as they reached the threshold, a loud thud came from the front door. Yuri's voice, booming through the hallway. "Mother, what's going on?" Yuri dropped the bags in his hands when he saw Tu Tieu half collapsed against the wall, her face pale as paper. His eyes darted to the untouched second half of the soup still on the table. He could smell something bitter beneath the aroma of chicken broth. He rushed to Tu Tieu's side, scooping her into his arms. "What happened?" he demanded, his voice trembling with both fear and anger. I just made her soup," his mother stammered. "She said she didn't feel well." "Enough!" Yuri's voice cracked like thunder. He carried Tu Tieu to the bedroom, laying her down carefully before dialing the family doctor. His hands shook as he wiped the sweat from her brow, whispering, "Stay with me, Tu Tieu. Please." The doctor arrived within minutes, his expression grim as he examined her. "She's been poisoned," he said flatly. The words made Yuri's blood run cold. When Yuri turned back toward the living room, his mother was nowhere to be found. The sound of the back gate creaking open confirmed it. She had fled. That night was long. Tu Tieu drifted in and out of consciousness, haunted by flashes of pain. Yuri sat by her side the entire time, his mind a whirlwind of worry and rage. Why? Why can't my mother see how much she means to me? When morning came, Tu Tieu opened her eyes slowly. Her voice was barely a whisper. "Yuri? Was it her?" He hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, but I won't let her hurt you again. I promise." Days passed, and Tu Tieu began to regain some strength. Yet the emotional wound cut deeper than any physical pain. She had always known Yuri's mother didn't accept her. But this was a line crossed beyond forgiveness. One evening, Yuri suggested they leave the house for a while. "Let's go somewhere peaceful," he said. "Just the two of us. You need a place where no one can hurt you." Tu Tieu looked at him, her eyes filling with tears. "But your mother—" "She's made her choice," he interrupted, his voice firm, "and I've made mine." They left at dawn the next morning, Yuri's arm protectively wrapped around her as they stepped into the soft glow of the sunrise. But as they walked away from the house, neither noticed the figure watching from an upstairs window, Yuri's mother, her expression unreadable. Her plan had failed once, but her eyes hinted at something dangerous. She wasn't done yet. And deep down, Tu Tieu felt it too, that the storm in their lives was far from over. The morning air in the countryside was cooler, carrying with it the scent of wet grass. Yuri had driven for hours, wanting to put as much distance as possible between them and the house where danger still lingered. Tu Tieu leaned her head against the car window, watching the trees blur past. She could feel Yuri's silent determination in the way he gripped the steering wheel, his jaw set like stone. They reached a small guest house hidden behind a grove of bamboo. The owner, an elderly woman with kind eyes, showed them to a modest room with wooden floors and a view of a quiet pond. For the first time in days, Tu Tieu allowed herself to exhale fully. But peace was fragile. That night, Yuri stepped outside to take a call. Leaving Tu Tieu alone, she heard the faint crunch of footsteps on gravel outside the window. Her pulse quickened. Slowly, she moved toward the curtain and peeked out. A figure in a long dark coat stood by the edge of the bamboo grove, still, watching. The dim moonlight revealed just enough for Tu Tieu's heart to sink. It was her. Yuri's mother had found them. Tu Tieu backed away from the window, her breathing shallow. 100 questions flashed through her mind. How did she know? What would she do now? But there was no time to think. The door handle rattled. When Yuri returned, he found her trembling in the corner of the room. What happened? He asked urgently. She's here, Tu Tieu whispered, her voice breaking. Yuri's face drained of color. He moved toward the door, but the only thing he found outside was the sound of bamboo swaying in the wind. The figure was gone. Tu Tieu's world shatters when a routine prenatal checkup reveals a life-threatening illness. The news leaves her reeling, torn between fear for her unborn child and the uncertainty of her own future. But before she can find the strength to face the battle ahead, Yuri's mother sees an opening to finally drive her out of the family. Pretending to be concerned, she spreads cruel rumors, questions Tu Tieu's worthiness, and manipulates Yuri into doubting her. As tensions boil, Tu Tieu is left isolated and heartbroken, her health worsening with each passing day. But in the quiet moments of despair, an unexpected spark of resilience begins to grow. With her baby's life on the line, Tu Tieu must decide whether to fight back against the lies or walk away forever. This episode delivers raw emotion, gripping conflict, and a twist you won't see coming.